Alright guys, it is an absolutely spectacularly gorgeous first day of fall in the natural wonderland of South Austin, Texas. Here in Williamson Creek, I got the dragonflies buzzing around and Brother Hawk flying over. It is an absolutely spectacularly gorgeous Sunday, September 22nd, 2013, on the first day of fall. And hallelujah. And what more glorious day. It is my birthday, as a matter of fact. And what I'm doing on this absolutely gorgeous day, since it is a Sunday, the old Doomsday Prophet for his birthday is back on Doomsday Rock to bring you my latest Doomsday sermon from my latest Bible of the Apocalypse, which is this slim little volume written in 1989 that I have never read in my life, simply titled The End of Nature. The End of Nature, written by one of my heroes here on Humpty Dumpty Tried, my fellow Doomsday Prophet and environmental alarmist, Bill McKibben. Now, because Bill McKibben is so well known for his work on climate change and global warming, I jumped to the erroneous conclusion that The End of Nature simply was going to be about climate change and global warming. And while that is an important part of the book, along with genetic modification and genetic engineering, which was barely on the horizon 24 years ago when this book was written, this book is about so much more. It is, as the title says, about the end of nature. Not just so much how human beings have become separate from nature, but how at the close of the 20th century and the opening years of the 21st, we have become such a dominant force on this planet that we have, for all intents and purposes, destroyed nature. We have brought about the end of nature. And this slim little volume, it's 200 pages. There's not one footnote, not one chart, no graphs. This is just him more than science. This is an absolutely poetic, basically a requiem for a destroyed planet would have been another one. So I don't know. It was hard for me just to limit this to 8 lengthy passages, so I could sit here and read this entire book. I encourage you to get this book and read it for yourself. For anyone who wants to sit around, and I'll probably just sit here and read this book on this glorious day until the battery runs out. But without further ado, The End of Nature by Bill McKibben. Almost every day I hike up the hill out my back door. Within 100 yards, the woods swallow me up, and there is nothing to remind me of human society. No trash, no stumps, no fence, not even a real path. Looking out from the high places, you cannot see road or house. It is a world apart from man. But once in a while, someone will be cutting wood farther down the valley, and the snarl of a chainsaw will fill the woods. I call the sound of the chainsaw in the woods Gideon's trumpet. It is harder on those days to get caught up in the timeless meaning of the forest, for man is nearby. The sound of the chainsaw doesn't blot out all the noises of the forest or drive the animals away, but it does drive away that feeling that you are in another separate, timeless, wild sphere. So he uses the apt analogy of the chainsaw in the woods, Gideon's trumpet, to launch into his treatise. And now that we have changed the most basic forces around us, the noise of that chainsaw, meaning the noise of global industrial civilization epitomized by the chainsaw, will always be in the woods. We have changed the atmosphere, and that will change the weather. Blah, blah. Even in the most remote wilderness, where the strictest laws forbid the felling of a single tree, the sound of that saw will still be clear, and a walk in the woods will be changed, tainted by its whine. The world outdoors will mean much the same thing now as the world indoors. The hill, the same thing as the house. This guy is truly, I had no idea what a great writer this guy was. An idea, a relationship, can go extinct, just like an animal or a plant. The idea in this case is nature, the separate and wild province, the world apart from man to which he adapted, under whose rules he was born and died. In the past, we spoiled and polluted parts of that nature, inflicted environmental damage. But that was like stabbing a man with toothpicks. Though it hurt, annoyed, degraded, it did not touch vital organs or block the path of the lymph or blood. We never thought that we had wrecked nature. Deep down, we never really thought we could. It was too big and too old. Its forces, the wind, the rain, the sun, were too strong, too elemental. But quite by accident, it turned out that the CO2 and other gases we were producing in our pursuit of a better life, in our pursuit of warm houses and eternal economic growth, and of agriculture so productive it would free most of us from farming, could alter the power of the sun, could increase the heat. So on and so forth about global warming, his favorite subject. And now this is speaking from 1989, 24 years ago. He was writing, "Those things may or may not have yet begun to happen, but it is too late to altogether prevent them from happening. We have produced the carbon dioxide. We are ending nature." Oh, boy. And let's see, I could keep on with this, but I have 8. That's how he introduces it. I need to be jumping quickly into this book because I could be here for hours. Continuing to page 85. Talking about cancer, skin cancer is what is when I'm getting into this. But the cancer and the rising sea level and the other physical effects are still, in 1989, in the future. For now, let's concentrate on what it feels like to live on a planet where nature is no longer nature. What is the sadness about? And this is his treatise on the grief that a few of us, more and more of us on this planet, the grief that dominates our life as we watch humanity destroy nature. Okay, what is the sadness about? Well, in the first place, merely the knowledge that we screwed up. It may have been an inevitable divorce. Man, so powerful, may not have been meant to live forever within the constraints of nature. It may have been an inevitable progression. man growing up to be stronger than his mother nature. But even inevitable passages such as these are attended by grief. Ambition, growth, takes us away from the old comforts and assurances. We are used to the idea that something larger than we are and not of our own making surrounds us, that there is a world of man and a world of nature. Then he quotes, he has a long quote from E.B. White, which I would like to share with you, but in the interest of time, I'm really sorry to be skipping through this, guys, because this is absolutely poetry, and I would like to share him sharing E.B. White. Okay, jumping ahead back to him. Anyway, I don't think that this separation, the separation between humanity and nature, was an inevitable divorce. The genetically programmed growth of a child. I think it was a mistake, and that consciously or unconsciously, many of us realize that it was a mistake. And this adds to our sadness. Many have fought to keep this day from coming to pass, fought their local battles, it is true, perhaps without realizing exactly what was at stake, but still understanding that the independent world of nature was gravely threatened. These were, remember, 24 years ago writing this. By the late 1960s, an environmental consciousness had emerged, and in the 1970s and 1980s, real progress was being made. Air pollution in many cities had been reduced, wilderness set aside, and Lake Erie, the dead lake, that symbol of ultimate degradation, was rescued from the grave. So there is the sadness of losing something we have begun to fight for, and the added sadness or shame of realizing how much more we could have done. A sadness that shades into self-loathing. I think I talked a lot about self-loathing in my birthday rant yesterday. We, all of us in the first world, have participated in something of a binge, a half century of unbelievable prosperity and ease. We may have had some intuition that it was a binge and that this earth could not support it. But aside from the easy things, biodegradable detergent, slightly smaller cars, we didn't do much. We didn't turn our lives around to prevent it. Our sadness is almost an aesthetic response, appropriate because we have marred a great, mad, profligate work of art. We have taken a hammer to the most perfectly proportioned of sculptures, which would be this planet. If you're unsure about what he's talking about there, guys. Okay, now he's moving ahead. We're on to page 149 while he's talking about how we're going to adjust as a global society to the death of nature. That adjustment, that adaptation is all that now remains to be discussed. There is no question that we stand near the end of the era of fossil fuels. There is a big question about that anyway. We have been on a century-long binge, meaning fossil fuel drinking binge. And now the doctors say we must stop drinking. Our liver just can't take it anymore. Were it simply drink, we might well stop. Though the addiction to alcohol is powerful, the world is filled with drunks turned sober. But it is not a luxury we are talking about here. It is almost our entire way of life, talking about our addiction to fossil fuels, the number one and biggest immediate threat to this planet. Our every comfort, the freedom from hard labor, especially for those of us who enjoy such freedom, depends on this drug. Oil is what has allowed us finally to dominate the earth instead of having the earth dominate us. And so we will try to find substitute drugs to give us this same high without further damaging our liver. Substitute fuels that won't produce carbon dioxide. But nuclear and solar and so on cannot stave off a great heating. We've already done too much. There are too many of us. And even when we cease to produce carbon dioxide, we still reek of methane. So we need to adapt in some other fashion as well. The question is, how? We could perhaps figure out some way to drastically trim our ways of life and our numbers. But our impulse will be to adapt not ourselves, but the earth. We will, I think, try to figure out a new way to continue our domination and hence our accustomed lifestyles, our hopes for our children, this defiance, this denial, this defiance in the face of this mounting evidence, which was clear to anybody with a brain 25 years ago, is our reflex. It is our reflex as a global industrial society. Our impulse will be to spurn the doomsayers, and to press bravely ahead into some new world. There you go. I know all about spurning doom and gloomers. Now I can just look at the numbers of people who will listen to me sharing the genius of Bill McKibben. Doomsday prophets, reading the words of doomsday prophets. Okay, jumping ahead. Almost all of us intuitively hold this idea of infinite progress, having imbibed it with our infant formula through the sterilized rubber nipple. I was not breastfed as a baby myself. And quite possibly, we are right. We will invent new tools. For example, genetic engineering is an unfathomably powerful technology, at least as powerful as the discovery of fire. It and other new technologies may well allow us to keep our juggling act going, to keep ourselves alive on the planet, to figure out ways to extend our control so completely that nothing, not even the rogue nature we have inadvertently created in our last century of progress, will escape our domination. Perhaps it is too late, and the various feedbacks we may be triggering in the forest and methane sledges will wipe us out. Sign me up for that one, Bill. But those defiant optimists, I love it, defiant optimists like Julian Simon could as easily be correct in their assertion that we can have a macro-managed world, a world where people and things are, quote, managed in projects that are very large, very complex, and very lengthy, close quote. Such a world might well allow us to continue with our ways of life even in the face of the coming heat. It might be a means of escape. It would replace our brute dominion over the earth with a clever, more far-reaching rule. There you go. And so now we come to his final chapter, A Path of More Resistance. The logic of our present thinking that we should increase in numbers and especially in material wealth and ease leads inexorably in the direction of the managed world. It is as a few rebels have maintained a rut, a system of beliefs in which we are trapped. This rut was what my rant was about yesterday. This system of beliefs in which we are trapped. When Thoreau declared that the mass of men led lives of quiet desperation, it was to this rut that he referred. You know, good God, and that was, when was he out there? 130 years ago, Thoreau was recognizing the rut. But most of us have lived in this rut without rebelling, without getting up on the rock on their birthday. A few, often under Thoreau's influence, may have chucked their sophomore year to live in a tent by some wild lake, but even most of them, I would say 99.99% of them, returned to normal society. Thoreau's explanation that we think there is no choice may help explain this fact, but the terrible truth of the matter is that most of us rather like this rut. We like acquiring more things. They make us happy. We like the easy life. I was skimming through an old copy of the New Yorker not long ago and came across an advertisement from what in 1949 was still the Esso company, now ExxonMobil, that summed up our century at the mid-century point. Quote, "The better you live, the more oil you use," the advertisement shouted. And we live well. The world, as most of us in the West experience it in the late 20th century, is a reasonably sweet place. That is why there are not more hippies camped out by the lake. We like to camp, but only for the weekend. The only trouble is that this system of beliefs, this pleasant rut, seems not to be making the planet happy. The atmosphere and the forest are less satisfied than we are. In fact, they are changing and dying. And those changes affect us, body and soul. The end of nature sours all my material pleasures. the prospect of living in a genetically engineered world sickens me. And yet it is toward such a world that our belief in endless material advancement hurries us. And as long as that desire drives us, there is no way for us to set limits. We won't develop engineering to eradicate disease and not use it to manufacture perfectly efficient chickens. I was watching a TED Talk 2 days ago about genetically manufacturing chickens that don't need to be fed. Headless chickens. There is nothing in the logic of our ingrained beliefs that would lead us to draw those lines. Direct our beliefs into a new stream, and that stream will soon become a torrent just like the present one. If we use fusion energy instead of coal, we will still plow ahead at our basic business, accumulation, and with all its implications for the natural world. If there is one notion that virtually every successful politician on earth, be it socialist or fascist or capitalist, agrees on, it is that economic growth is good. Growth is good. Necessary growth is good and necessary, and is the proper end of organized human activity. But where does economic growth end? It ends, or at least it runs straight through the genetically engineered dead world that the optimists envision. That is, provided we can surmount our present environmental troubles without throwing all that shit into the into the view. I like he talks about doomsday prophets here. But he asks, what if we began to believe in the rainforest for its own sake? This attitude has very slowly begun to spread in recent years, both in America and abroad, as the effects of man's domination have become clearer. Some few people have begun to talk of two views of the world: the traditional, man-centered, anthropocentric view, and the biocentric vision of people as part of the world, just like bears. Many of those who take this biocentric view are, of course, oddballs, the sort who would walk 2,000 miles instead of flying. Prophets, false or true, are inevitably oddballs. There is not much need for prophets who are in sync with this society. And they're talking about the biocentric view is admittedly a radical idea, almost an unrealistic idea. It strikes at the root of our identities. But we live at a radical, unrealistic moment. We live at the end of nature, the moment when the essential character of the world we have known since we stopped swinging from our tails is suddenly changing. And then, he talks about, like I did, how he is trapped into this. Talking about this biocentric view is an alternative that would involve changing not only the way we act, but also the way we think. We're changing neither. And then he goes on to visit one of his favorite doomsday prophets, who I've mentioned before here and need to get some Bibles by. My hero, Dave Foreman, the founder of Earth First. So he's interviewing Dave Foreman about his ideas about deep ecology. Okay, we're just talking about how he went from working inside the system to just trying to gut it. This is Dave Foreman. The whole time I had been in Washington, I'd been radical philosophically. I believed in wilderness for its own sake. But for a long time, I had believed that the best way to get more wilderness was to be reasonable, to take those Republican politicians to lunch. But then he started pulling his head out of his ass, and it made me realize we were fighting for crumbs under the table. I guess I came to the conclusion that the industrial empire was a cancer on the earth, and that saving some dinky recreational area was not enough. We had to offer a fundamental challenge to Western civilization. And that's how was born the group Earth First. Let's see. Continuing with David Foreman. From my Wilderness Society experience, I began to wonder, why preserve a wilderness area? Because it's a nice place to go to and relax? Because you can make pretty picture books of it? To protect a watershed? No. You protect a river because it is a river. For its own sake. Because it has a right to exist by itself. The grizzly bear in Yellowstone National Park has as much right to her life as any one of us has to ours. Each of you, meaning everyone out there listening to him, is an animal, and you should be proud of it. Continuing with David. There are fundamental problems of philosophy at the root of all this. And you're talking about most environmental groups discuss the need to balance continued economic growth with the protection for future generations of our natural heritage. Foreman says, I have really thought about it and tried to look for the good news, for signs that reform will work. And I have come to the belief that the flaw is fundamental, unreformable. We can have big wilderness, and we can reintroduce extirpated species, but unless the fact that there are way too many people on this earth is dealt with, unless the idea that the world is a resource for us to use is dealt with, unless humans can find their way home again, the problems will continue. And I have one more passage going back to the end of nature to end this sermon. Those are hard questions, but perhaps not beyond our imagination. When we decided that accumulation and growth were our economic ideals, we invented wills and lending at interest rates and Puritanism and supersonic aircraft. Why would we come up with ideas less powerful in an all-out race to do with less? Yeah, right. The difficulty in this is almost certainly more psychological than intellectual. Less that we can't figure out major alterations in our way of life than we simply don't want to figure out solutions to this problem. Even if our way of life has destroyed nature and endangered this planet, it is so hard to imagine living in any other fashion. The people whose lives that may point the way, Thoreau, say, or Gandhi, we dismiss as exceptional. A polite way of saying there is no reason we should be expected to go where they pointed us. The challenge they presented with the physical examples of their lives is much more subversive than anything they wrote or they said. If they could live those simple lives, it's no use saying we could not. I could, I suppose, get by on half the money I currently spend. A voluntary simplification of lifestyle is not beyond our abilities, but it is probably outside of our desires. There you go, and hallelujah. And of course, if you want to hear my comment on that comment, you can tune into yesterday's rant. But that is it for this sermon from my new Bible of the Apocalypse, End of Nature, by Doomsday Prophet Bill McKibben. Amen, Brother Bill. And with that, I will wrap up this sermon and figure out what I'm going to do on my birthday, on this gorgeous day in Austin, Texas. I hear some rumors of a picking party tonight. So I will say, bye guys.